All right, wake up. I'm sure you fell asleep. Back to finish the second part of my life here, which again, I don't know why. Vert says I have to do it. So if you're listening or fell asleep, wake up, whatever, I don't know, here we go again. So we just finished Tampa, and I think one of the last things I mentioned that I did get drafted by the Minnesota Twins in the 30th round, which was obviously a dream of my life. So I go home, obviously our season ended, I mentioned didn't make it to the postseason, go back home to Stamford and waiting for the draft. I think the draft was June 6th that year, and I had no idea what the draft entailed. It wasn't just part of something that I had ever known. You know, I just had a goal of playing professional ball, getting drafted. So I asked my summer coach that I was playing 16 to 18 Babe Ruth still. No, that was over, sorry. I asked my ex-coach, Bob Kennedy, who I think I might have mentioned previously, who was the editor of the sports section of the Stamford Advocate, and I asked him if he knew what that whole process entailed, and he said, go talk to Bobby V, and Bobby Valentine. I said, I don't know Bobby Valentine, I had never met him. I mean, I knew everything about him, and had heard how great he was, blah, 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 but I had never met him. And he said, well, I was just up at Catholic High, which is now Trinity High, and Bobby's up there watching a baseball game. Why don't you go up there? So I wandered up to Catholic High and found Bobby. I knew what he looked like, and this is a really weird part of the story, and I really feel like I've told this before, but I go walking up to Bobby Valentine, I introduce myself, and he opens up his hand, and he's got my name written down on a piece of paper. It might have been a matchbook from his restaurant, I think. And I don't know how that possibly happened. There were no cell phones back then. This was the horse and buggy ages. So my coach, Bob Kennedy, couldn't have called him. I don't know how it happened. I still don't know to this day. And I don't know if we tried to talk about it, we probably wouldn't remember. But so I asked Bobby V, what's this whole draft thing like? I'm hoping to get drafted. He had known who I was, but we had never met. He didn't know any of the details. And he explains to me how the process happens. You're going to get a telegram. Which I did. I don't remember the date, but I do remember walking up and going into my mailbox at 25 Edis Road in Stamford, and there was a Minnesota Twins return email address, and that was an exciting day. I mean, I can feel it right now, man. I opened that up and saw that I got drafted, and I just started jumping and screaming. My mom was home, and she came running out, what's going on? It was an unbelievable day to have reached that goal, and just started calling everybody and telling everybody. So I call Bobby and tell Bobby, and he's all excited, blah blah blah, and he offers to help. I mean, meeting Bobby that day at Trinity, was, as you'll hear, was such a huge day in my life. Obviously the baseball part of it, but the second half of my life, other than the professional part with the Minnesota Twins, is been with Bobby Valentine. We've been together for almost 40 years. So he gives me advice that, if somebody's going to call you, which they do, they call me and tell me congratulations, we want to come up and talk about this whole process and sign you. So Bobby, who at the time was, I believe, the third base coach for the Mets, he's in town. He agrees to come over, and he kind of acts as my agent that day. So Herb Stein comes over to my house. He's actually the guy who found Rod Carew, which is another interesting part of that story coming up. He comes to my house, congratulations, all excited for me, which is part of his job, and talks a little about the process, and offers me my contract, and they're going to give me a $2,500 signing bonus for getting drafted in the 30th round. And this was pretty funny. He obviously knew who Bobby was, so he was excited to see Bobby, and they talked about some stories. But Bobby was sitting on the couch, and Herb was over here, and I was over there, my mom was over there, and when he mentioned the $2,500 signing bonus, Bobby lifts his hand up behind him with a 5, and so he doesn't see, to tell me to ask for 5. So here I am. I'm so excited to have gotten drafted. I know it's in the 30th round, but don't forget Piazza got drafted in the 60th round as Hall of Famer. And I'm gonna negotiate for $2,500 more, which was really weird. And I did, and they actually gave it to me, which was pretty cool. So Bobby and I took a little walk before I signed. We walked down the street and said, what do you want to do here? And I said, I don't know. Yeah, I want to play. Because I had another year left of college. I got drafted out of my junior year. You're eligible after your junior year under most circumstances. He says, you can go back and get your degree, play your final year. Who knows what happens next year? Maybe you get drafted higher. Maybe you make some more money. Maybe you don't. There's a lot of things to consider. Maybe you get hurt. And we decided that I was going to sign. Went back to the house, signed, which was pretty exciting. And that night, Bobby V invites me down to his restaurant. Me and my family go down to his restaurant, which that restaurant plays a large part in my life, which you'll hear. Makes an announcement to packed, I believe it was a Friday night, it was a packed night. And he announces that local guy, Frank Ramppen, just signed with the Minnesota Twins today. Everybody cheers and some champagne and buys me and my family dinner. It was a really, really, really cool night. And the beginning of my professional baseball career and the beginning of a incredible journey in my life with Bobby V in so many ways that I'm going to tell you all those boring stories because Vern says I should. So I get assigned to rookie ball in Elizabethton, Tennessee, and I don't know the time frame. It was probably a week or so later. I'm off to Elizabethton, Tennessee, and in rookie ball, I think in most rookie ball still to the day, you don't live in an apartment. You live with a foster family. So the Hiders took me in. They were he was the high school baseball and football coach. And his son was, I think, a junior at the time. His oldest son, his name they called the Mud. He was one of the best players on the team, and the other brother, Greg. So there were two boys and the mother and father, and they were popular in the town of Elizabethton, Tennessee, which was a lot different town than I have ever been in. So here I am. I just left the University of Tampa, having 5 of the greatest months of my life with my buddies, and college baseball, there's such a bond, there's such a unity. Now pro ball with all these strangers and everybody's fighting for a job. And I'm living in a wonderful family, but a very religious Baptist family from Elizabethton, Tennessee. And I'm sleeping in a very small room with Mud, 17-year-old high school guy. We got a little room. It's a culture shock for me to be in that situation. Never heard that, huh? And another one of the funny stories where they had a pool table in their basement, and one of the first few nights there, they asked me to go downstairs and we're playing pool, and I missed a shot, and they just said, "Oh, damn." And the younger son, Greg, said, "Frank, you don't have to swear or you don't have to cuss." And I'm like, oh my God. I said, "Damn," and the kid called me on it. So just a tremendous family. They took me into their home. They fed me every night, and I lived in their house. It was a wonderful thing for them to do, and tremendous people, and we stayed in touch for a few years after. But definitely culture shock for me to be living in those circumstances after being at the University of Tampa, having the fun that I mentioned to you. So first day I go to the field and gonna get my uniform, and Waters was my coach's name, who had played in the big leagues for a while. I can't remember his first name. I walk into his office, he's chewing tobacco, older guy, and he hands me my uniform, and number 55. Now, 55 is a cool number now, but 100 years ago when I played, those double-digit high numbers were not cool. And I go, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to ask for another number. I got number 55. I go walking back to my locker in kind of a beat-up rookie ball locker room in Elizabethton, Tennessee, and I start getting dressed for a pregame workout. And as I put on my pants, all the uniforms are hand-me-downs from the major leagues in years past. And as I'm putting on my pants, they have the long belt snap over, and the player who wore those pants are actually embroidered in the waistband. And I got Rod Carew's pants. So that was pretty cool. I still have them. They're torn up. I ripped them pretty good, but that was a pretty cool experience. And so the back to the Herb Stein, who signed me. He found Rod Carew and signed me. A little different level players, but I ended up somehow with Rod Carew's pants. So rookie ball was really, really interesting, man. It was so different from college ball. And then we all got along. We had a good team that played together, but there's a different feeling that everybody's fighting for their own jobs and want to advance their careers and ready to step on people. And it was an interesting few months of getting accustomed to the whole pro ball thing. Probably the guy that you might remember, Verge knows every player in the history of baseball. Jim Eisenreich was on my team that year, who ended up playing in the big leagues for the Twins for years, and just an amazing story on him. I'm trying not to tell too many stories about everything, but he had Tourette's, and if you don't know what Tourette's is, you have these little quirks that you do that, and his was he would shake his head and make these little noises, and it was just unbelievable that he had that physical ailment and just hit like he was an animal. And I'm like, this guy's going up to the batter's box, sweet swinging lefty, and he would have, you could physically see it. He'd have these little tweaks, these things going on, and just rake. And here I am, I don't have any of that stuff, and I wasn't raking like him. So pretty interesting story about him. I remember the night I was out in California when he got called up to the big league. So happy for him. Good dude. And a lot of good guys, but again, people were fighting for their own jobs. So played that season, and I'm not going to tell every detail of every year, but played for 4 years, played that year in Elizabeth, Tennessee. Got called up to high A ball the next year, 2 years there, and the second year there I got called up and played in Double A, but played in Visalia, California, which that was a whole different ball game from rookie ball. Rookie ball, you're living with a family. Out in California, you're living with friends in an apartment. Weird thing there is as guys get released and new guys come, sometimes you lose your roommate and you get a new roommate, but that was a lot of fun. And the weather was so beautiful out in California that they scheduled off days every Monday, which is so uncommon, usually playing every day of the week. So we had Mondays off. I was friends with a bunch of guys from California. Carson took me to, we went to go down to Newport Beach, California for my first time ever trying surfing. He had a VW bus and got the surfboards at his house. He went to UC Irvine, and we go to Newport Beach to go surfing, and there were no waves that day, which was unbelievable. But unbelievable, great time out in Visalia. The travel was pretty easy. I think the longest bus ride was like 6.5 hours, and that was to Reno, Nevada, which was an unbelievable trip. And good team. Cool story about Reno, Nevada. It was the 3rd of July, and my dad and my sister were out visiting, and it was the Reno team was the Padres, and they had some pretty good players on that team. Kevin McReynolds, who was in the big leagues, Ozzie Guillen, who was in the big leagues, John Kruk in the big leagues, from ESPN, were on that team. And I'm watching, Lake Tahoe is in that direction from where the field was, and I'm watching these dark clouds come rolling in the middle of the game. I think we're going to get poured on, but it's a little chilly for July 3rd, and shockingly enough, we get snowed out that day. In the 8th inning, this huge, massive snowstorm comes in, and they have to call the game because there's a blizzard on July 3rd in Reno, Nevada. And actually, we get on the bus heading back to Visalia that night. My dad said, "Why don't you stay with me overnight?" Because we had a day off the next day, and I didn't think I should ask the coach. It turned out he said, Phil Roof, which was a great guy, told me I could have stayed. You should have asked. We got stuck in the Highland Pass. I think it was called the Highland Pass that takes you, or the Donner Pass that takes you from the Reno area back to the road that takes you back down to Visalia. 10 hours sitting on the bus without moving, stuck in the snow that night. And I think it ended in a tie, believe it or not, but that was a pretty cool experience. But the California League was great. And the second year that I was out there, the team was unbelievable. Won the championship, but I wasn't there for the championship. I got called up to Double A, which is a cool story. But that year, great bunch of guys. Kirby Puckett was on that team. He played center field for us, hands down the best player in the league, and one of the best teammates I ever had. And there were a lot of great guys on that team and guys that I was really good friends with. But Kirby had this ability to make everybody on the team feel like they were superstars. Like his nickname for me was Scald, because I hit the ball so hard. That's what he said. Now this guy's hitting close to 400 the whole year, hands down the best player in the league, goes on to the major leagues, Hall of Famer, everybody knows the story. And he's making everybody, I'm in 250. 260 at best, and he's making me feel like I'm this special guy, and same as everybody else on the team. And he was a tremendous guy, and won the championship that year because of that. But getting called up to AA, that was a pretty cool experience. And I wasn't doing great, but there was a series of events that happened that guys got moved up. There was an injury at the big leagues. Somebody had catcher Jeff Reed got moved up to AA to the big leagues, and just players had to get moved around. And the knock on my door in my apartment, me and my buddy Frank Ramppen are hanging out, and the scorekeeper / announcer at the Visalia Stadium, who never comes to our house, is at the door, and he says, "Hey, Ramp," everybody called me Ramp. "Hey, what's up? What are you doing?" He goes, "I just wanted to congratulate you." I said, "On what?" He said, "Oh, you didn't hear? Skip didn't get a hold of you?" I said, "No." He said, "You're going to AA." Got called up to AA. So I mean, that's a huge thing to happen. You know, I'm in high A ball, now I'm getting called up to AA. And we hang out for a couple minutes. We probably have a beer, and he leaves, and me and Frank are sitting there looking at each other. I mean, what do I do now? I mean, the official scorekeeper told me this, and I'm waiting. Finally, coach called and told me I was getting called up to AA, and the next day I was off to AA. Bam, you're out, just like that, which was pretty cool. And another fun part of that story, I get to AA the next day. We're in Orlando, and the game gets rained out, which means we're all going out, wherever we're going, which, that's pretty much protocol, and I'm used to that in the baseball world. But, being called up to a new level, I'm a little nervous. I don't want to go out and have a couple beers, but of course I do. And the next night, first at bat, bases loaded, I take 5 pitches. I don't swing the bat and get to a 3-2 count. My first swing of the bat in AA at a grand slam. So that was a pretty cool memory, and good phone calls home those couple nights. It was, hey, I got called up to AA, everybody's happy and going nuts. Next night I'm rained out, next night first pitch grand slam. And actually at the end of that season I had to catch a little bit, but my last year, without getting into all the details, it was a wonderful experience. But my next year in spring training, they knew I could play a lot of different positions. They saw me catch at the tail end of that season because a catcher got hurt. And again, the coach that I was with my first year in A-ball was now in AA, Phil Roof. He was next catcher in the big leagues. Somebody gets hurt. He says, "Hey, tutor," and that's a fun story. He called me tutor for one of my skills that I had. If you know me, you know what they are. He says, "I heard you used to catch a little bit in college." I said, "Yeah, I caught one semester my junior year." He says, "Well, I need you to catch. You're catching tonight." And he loved how I caught. So next year I go to spring training and I'm catching, which I was not happy about. I didn't love catching. You get beat up. I thought I was a hell of a third baseman / shortstop infielder. And I end up catching for most of camp, which this was a pretty interesting thing that happened every year that I was there. Like days left in spring training, I think I'm going to AAA. The next day I'm going to AA. The next day I'm going to A-ball. And that happened the previous year. Like, oh, you're so excited, I think I'm going to AAA, and now I'm going to California, which California was great, but getting demoted. They told me they wanted me to catch, and I was working out with the AAA team again. They demoted me to AA, and then on the last day they're sending me back to low A ball. So I was skipping Visalia, which was a high A ball team, and going to Visalia, to Wisconsin, the low A team, which really, really broke my heart. And I told them that I'm almost 25. I'm going the wrong way. If you like me as a catcher, that's great, but I showed you I can catch, I can play all the positions. You see my stats from the years. At least send me back to California. It makes me at least know you're a little interested in me. And they said no. And my dad was with me at the time visiting, and we decided that this wasn't happening. My dreams weren't coming true. Now I obviously could have stuck it out and gone to A-ball and tried to fight my way to the top, but it was tough. It was a really tough decision. I decided, I guess this is it. The writing's on the wall, and that was the end of my professional career. But during that process, while I was playing, and by the way, that was really hard. I'm kind of playing it off right now, but that was tough. While I'm playing, I'm not sure what year it was, when I was coming home in the off season. I was taking some classes. By the way, that was one of the things when I took the walk with Bobby the day that I signed. He said, if you sign right now, you got to promise me you're going to go back and get your degree, which I promised him. And it's funny, I went back to get my degree at Sacred Heart right up the street, which he's now the athletic director of. And I was taking some classes at Sacred Heart in the off season, but also looking to make some money. I'm looking in the Stamford Advocate and I see Bobby Valentine is looking for a bartender. So I called down to Bobby Valentine's in Virgin. I swear I've told this story again in front of this camera, but Bobby answers the phone, which is unusual. And yeah.
Yes, this camera for something else.
Okay, it's not the same story. So I told my life story somewhere else. So Bobby answers the phone. Hey Frank, we shoot shit for a second. And says, I saw there's an ad in the paper. You need a bartender. He said, yeah, you're not a bartender? He said, no. He said, come on down. I went down. I kind of watched the bartenders bartending that night. He talked to me a little bit, and next thing you know, I'm bartending at Bobby V's in the off season, and that was the beginning of a long relationship with him at the restaurant. So in the off seasons, I'm bartending, I'm taking classes at Sacred Heart to get my degree. I always joke with people, I did get my degree from Sacred Heart, business management, and I graduated 11 years after I started, which is kind of funny, but I made it. I got my degree, I fulfilled my obligation, my promise, and obviously I was planning on doing that, but you got to get your degree. So my career ends, we decide that, make that decision, and I didn't want to come home at the time. Spring training was in Melbourne, Florida, and my boy Lou was still living in Tampa working, and I really didn't want to come home. I didn't want to come home and tell the story to everybody I knew what happened to my career, because it was heartbreaking, man. That was my life, and it was a tough decision. So I go back to Tampa to hang out and live with Lou and delay going home and taking on real life. And I end up getting a job with a construction company with the Gasparino family from Stamford, Connecticut, believe it or not. They're from Stamford. They moved down to Brandon, Florida, and they opened up a construction business. I don't know how I ran into them, and they hire me, and I'm working there for a while. And there's a really funny story one day where I was not a handyman. My dad was, but I was not a handyman. I'm doing construction work with them. They're doing renovations on a house. We're putting up a new roof on some house. I'm up on the roof all day. You're walking on the trusses, and about halfway through the day, I slip, fall through the sheetrock. Not just my leg goes popping through the sheetrock of the kitchen while the mother of the house is doing the dishes right there. So now I put a big hole in their kitchen, which they were such nice people, and my bosses were cool about it. It was kind of funny, but obviously cost time and money to fix that. And at the end of that same day, people had a beautiful built-in pool, and the small crew that we had, they said, go take a dip in the pool. And I go jump on the diving board. I told you my dad was a diver, so I knew how to dive and swim pretty well. And kind of a small diving board, but I go to do my thing because I could dive, and snap the diving board right in half. And they didn't fire me. They went back to work. So I'm there with Lou, and we're having a good time living in Tampa. I don't know what he was doing at the time. He had a couple different jobs with hotels, doing some delivery stuff. I'm working construction. Then I finally decide, all right, this is it. I'm going to go back home. My mom was back home. I didn't mention this, but my parents divorced when I went off to college. That's a whole other story. You don't want to hear that. It's not fun. I decide, finally time to go back home. I actually had told my mom I'm probably going to be coming home in the next couple of weeks. Gave my notice at my job, and my dad comes down for a visit, probably to help out with the move, whatever. And it might have been my last day at work for the construction company for Gasparino. And I come home, and my dad and Lou are sitting in our living room, hanging out. Lou's got this grin on his face. I'm like, what's going on? They bought a shoe store. My dad and Lou had a friend that somehow he ran into, and the guy was looking to sell a shoe business in Brandon, Florida. And for whatever reason, without talking to me, they thought it was a good idea. So Lou and I are now in the shoe store, and I'm not coming back home to Stamford. And we don't know anything about running the business, about the shoe business, about anything. And my dad just walked through the store, did some quick calculations on the amount of money that they were asking for. If we sold every shoe in that store at a flea market for $2, we'd walk out of it without getting hurt and make a couple bucks, which we didn't do that, and we didn't make a couple bucks. So next thing you know, Lou and I are in business, and actually the guy who used to write for the Tampa Tribune went to school with us, and he had an article in the Tampa paper with a picture of Lou and I saying, from stolen bases to shoelaces, Frank Ramppen and Lou Rettman in the shoe business. So there's some really, really funny stories about that. You gotta be there though. I mean, this is boring stuff, but we had to fit orthopedic shoes for infants, for little babies. So we're in our first day or first week, and a mom comes in with her baby, holding her baby with a prescription from a doctor. And Lou and I look at each other. We go behind the counter, which to the storage area, and we call the guys we bought the store from, and they walk us through what the prescription means. And it was pretty basic. There were certain shoes that helped with pronation, and there were bars that helped just if kids had pigeon toes or whatever. But we had no idea what we were doing. So Lou and I joke to this day that the parade in Brandon, Florida, where the shoe chest was, the shoe store was, has a bunch of people that walk in that parade that don't walk so well because we screwed up their feet. But that was some experience. Again, and I thought, I always thought I could do anything, and I'm going to be a businessman now, and I'm going to figure this out, and we're going to turn this into something profitable, and we're going to move on. And we had a lot of funny times fitting kids there. There was Lou and I looking at each other while kids come in and we're dumping sand out of their shoes into the garbage can. They're fidgety little kids that we deal with now for baseball, but it was pretty interesting experience. But we ended up getting out of that. I don't think we lost any money, but we didn't make any money. And one more story there. One Saturday, so Lou's one of the greatest guys in the world. Neither of us had much money, but if Lou had $10, he'd share every bit of it with you. Wasn't great with money, wasn't great with managing money. I was the money guy of our business. But one day it's a Saturday, and the store's packed, and we got people. We're Al Bundy sitting. If you don't, you're probably many of you too young to know who Al Bundy was, but a funny sitcom that was on TV for a while. He was a shoe salesman. Lou and I sitting fitting kids, and the front of the store was all windows, and he's on that side fitting a kid, I'm on this side fitting a kid, and I look over and his car is driving out of the parking lot, and this car is being stolen. So I look over and he makes eye contact with me. He goes, repossessed. His car got repossessed one day while we're fitting shoes at the shoe chest. Pretty funny. So that didn't work. Finally, I come back home to Stamford. Actually, Lou, you screwed me on that one. Lou, the deal was I was packing up all the furniture. All the furniture that we had was my furniture that my dad had given us because he moved from one place to another or sent us his furniture. And we had gone to Tahoe, and we went skiing out in Tahoe. We were supposed to be coming back to Tampa, packing up the van, and both of us were going to drive home. Lou was heading back up to Massachusetts. I was heading to Stamford. And Lou never came back. He went home because his sister's son was born with spina bifida, so he went home and did the right thing. He was a good brother, but then he never came back to Tampa to drive home with me. I still owe you for that. So I come back to Stamford, still had a few more classes to get to graduate. Went back to work at Bobby V's, and really, the rest is history. I became a Bobby V's restaurant guy. I went from being a bartender and having a lot of fun to becoming a manager and pretty much taking over the place. I managed multiple locations. We had 7 locations at one time, and I was back and forth with Stamford, Norwalk for a while, and had a tremendous time doing that. I never thought in a million years I'd be in the restaurant business. It certainly isn't what I aspired to do, what I aspired to be, but developed an absolutely incredible relationship with Bobby that leads to many, many more stories. met my beautiful wife Michelle there, which I had my 2 beautiful boys, Frankie and Zach, from there. But it all started at Bobby V's. Have some tremendous friends, and it was great. Once I graduated and I was full-time manager there, eventually, I mean, I worked all kinds of crazy hours, and that place was jamming. Bobby V's was awesome. It was so much fun, and I was pretty good at it. You know, if you're passionate about what you're doing, and you know you're energetic, there's a lot of common sense into running a restaurant. You know, the drinks are supposed to be cold if they're supposed to be cold. The food's supposed to be hot if it's supposed to be hot. The place is supposed to be clean and friendly, and it's kind of common sense, but it's amazing to see people don't know how to do it, and kind of led people in the restaurant world just like I did on the baseball field. You know, with passion and intensity, but fair, and had a lot of fun. And you know that place was rocking. And I worked Saturday nights and Sundays and all kinds of crazy shifts, but my shifts for a long time became Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday days, and Thursday and Friday nights. And Thursday nights, one of my best friends in the world from high school, Billy O'Rourke, was the bartender, and we worked together for years and had so much fun. And Friday nights, Jim Gannon, Brian Hogan were bartending, and we became best of friends and still are, and just had tremendous time. People you trust, doing the right thing. It was like Cheers, if another sitcom reference, but we knew everybody's name. It was like, when we talk about it now, it was like every night we worked, it was like we were throwing a house party, but we had this beautiful place. And we did it by the rules, and we did it right. And, you know, I'm sure we overserved a few times. There's a few stories, Hogan, Jim, but we did it right and had an unbelievable time. And Michelle was working there. I hired my wife to work there, and you know, you're not supposed to, you know, mess around with your employees. I didn't. I married her, but she was tremendous, and we just had a great crew of people that worked there. And I was actually in the restaurant business for 20 years, and it was Bobby's thing. Bobby and Joe Romano, his partner Joe Romano, and Joe had 8 kids, and almost all of the kids worked at the restaurant. We became best of friends and just had a great time. And just between all the people working there and all the people that we knew, that it was just always crowded. There was always people in there, and the big sporting events were tremendous. And still, the Bobby V's that I ran and that we all worked at closed a couple years ago, but now there's a new Bobby V. That place was Bobby Valentine Sports Gallery Cafe, opened in 1980 by Bobby and Joe. But there's a new place now called Bobby V's that Bobby's partners with the OTB people, and it's a whole different animal than it was, but just so many tremendous times and stories in that business for years and years. Bobby kind of let me do my thing and us do our thing, and came back with lots of great ideas from all of his travels around the country with baseball, of all the places that he went to, and he had his ideas. When Bobby was in there, man, he worked, you know, as I think I've mentioned before, one of the hardest working guys I've ever met, one of the smartest guys I ever worked, and that relationship with Bobby just became humongous to me. I mean, in the early years, he wasn't around much. He was with the Rangers. Only saw him a few times throughout the year, but you know, Bobby definitely became my mentor, and he treated a lot of his people really well, including me. We started an annual ski trip. Actually, Bobby and Mike Allegra, another great friend that I met through the restaurant business. He was one of Bobby's original managers. He was running the Milford restaurant at the time, and the two of them were skiers, and they started a ski trip that I got in like on the 3rd year. And then we started this annual ski trip every year to all over the world, and it was just 3 of us, and then it got to 10, and there were tons of people on that ski trip. At times people would meet us there. The wives went one time when we went to Italy. We went over to Italy. Bobby had a conference that he was going to speak at, so we decided to turn that into a ski trip, and we skied at Madonna di Campiglia. But so many tremendous ski trips that I thought I was doing hats every year, making hats for all the people. I think there was like 25 straight years of ski trips that we went on, that to Tahoe and Colorado and Whistler, and there's a good Whistler story that I should be careful how I tell this, but one of the years we go to Whistler, British Columbia, and PJ Romanos was on that trip, who was another great guy. He was running the Norwalk restaurant at the time. He's still in the restaurant hotel business down south. Still see him on Facebook, doing great. Hi, PJ. He was not a skier, but was one of the main restaurant managers. So Bobby took him on the trip that year, and we go to Whistler, and we're skiing for a couple of hours, or maybe even an hour in the morning. And PJ says, "I can't hang out with you guys. You guys are way too good. I'm going down drinking at the bar." So he takes off. We ski all day. We come down. There's like 10 of us skiing together. Everybody's pretty good skiers, and we would have waited for PJ, and we were waiting for PJ, but he didn't want to keep us, and he wanted to go have a couple beers. So we come down at the end of the day, 4 o'clock, we ski until lifts close, and we come down and we find PJ down at the bar in the lodge, and the place is packed. And he's been drinking for several hours, and he comes running over, bug-eyed, his eyes popping out of his head. He goes, "Look at this place, look around, check it out." We're like, "Well, what's going on?" He goes, "It's International Gay Week." And we're like, "What?" So we somehow went to Whistler for the International Gay Week convention, which, nothing against that, but it's definitely weird for 10 straight guys to be skiing at Whistler with a lot of people different than us in that regard. But we had a great time. All the trips were tremendous, but just part of some of the great things that happened with Bobby through the years, and I'll try to list them. But so I'm in the restaurant business, not what I planned on doing. I'm pretty good at it, doing okay. Again, all the relationships, all the fun. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hours. And then in August of 2003, well, I should back up. So I told you I met Michelle there. We got married. We lived in the basement of my mom's house. It really wasn't a basement. It was a raised ranch, and it was a finished part of the house. It was our family room for all the years. We lived there for 4 years because we bought a piece of property up in Reading, Connecticut. We saved every dime that we could. We were living in my mom's basement, which is just one room, and kudos to Michelle for putting up for that. And we were planning on doing it for just a couple of months. We're going to pay off the land, and we're going to build a house. Her dream was to build a house. Well, we ended up staying there for 4 years, which she's a champ for doing that. But yeah, we had fun. It was good. Saved a lot of money. We were paying rent to my mom, which she gave it all back. Thank you, Mom. And we built a house up in Reading. And that commute was kind of crazy, back and forth down to Stamford, all that traffic on the Merritt. So I used to come to work really early every morning, work out at the Y, get home late, it was crazy hours, blah, blah, blah. So on December 4th, 2001, probably one of the greatest days of my life, Francis Ellsworth Ramppen IV was born when we were living in Reading, and that was an unbelievable day in my life. It was crazy. I could cry right now. Being a dad, without a doubt, one of the greatest things in the world, even though they're a pain in the ass a lot. We had Frankie on December 4th, 2001, and then on August, I don't remember the date, 2003, Bobby and his wife Mary, me and Michelle are going to a fundraiser down in the city. Bobby's driving, Michelle and I are in the back seat. He's talking about possibly going back to Japan to manage the team that he had managed back in 94 or 95, the Chibalote Marines. And he said, just talking about a little bit, he was there and got fired. He took the team to over 500 for the first time in years. He had a little friction with the GM, he got fired. They're looking to bring him back. I can bring 2 American coaches with me. I said, "Oh, really? Who are you bringing?" I thought possibly he was thinking about his nephew Anthony, who had just gotten out of the Mets organization, who worked at the restaurant for us, and he was such a great manager, but hated every minute. It was unbelievable. He did not like it, but he still did an unbelievable job. Bobby said, "I'm thinking about taking Robbie, Tom Robson, who's his hitting coach for years and a great guy, and you." And I said, "Me? I haven't been in baseball now for years. Baseball was my life. It was everything, but I've been in the restaurant. We have a 1.5-year-old, and Michelle's pregnant with Zach, and we finally built our house up in Reading that we lived in my mom's basement for 4 years, and he's asking me if I want to go to Japan with him." And I basically that day said, "Are you crazy? I can't go to Japan." For all the reasons I just said, I went to Japan. We thought about it and made a decision, and in January of 2004, with Michelle 8 months pregnant, Frankie just turning 2, and this big house up in Reading, which is 20, a half an hour, whatever ride, depending on traffic, away from Stamford, where Michelle's parents and my mom were, my sister. I'm heading out. We packed the house a little bit. I left Michelle. Again, another great thing by Michelle. She's packing up that house because we're going to rent it, and I'm off to Japan. So I go over to Bobby manages. I go over to coach with Bobby at the major league level in Japan, having never coached one inning in my life. I've never hit a fungo, nothing. I was a baseball player, and I was as devoted and as intense as you could possibly think. But that was over, and I was in the restaurant business, and now I'm going to Japan where I don't speak the language. And that turned out to be the most incredible. And I've had a good life. It's been wonderful. I mean, the experience in Japan was incredible. We go over there. The first or second day we're over there, Bobby, in the little beautiful little town Kai Makahari that we live, we have these beautiful apartments. Bobby and I go to Gold's Gym in our town, which is on the 30th floor, overlooking the Tokyo Bay, and we see the most magnificent sunset with a silhouette of Mount Fuji in the background, which was unbelievable. And as I ended up being there for 6 years, talked to so many people who lived there for their whole lives, never saw that scene that we saw that day. It started that way and it ended that way. It was absolutely incredible, except we go to spring training in the first, I guess we were in our homes there for like a few days, and then we go, so a week. I'm in Japan for a week, and I get the flu. And I'm in a Japanese hospital, and I don't speak a word of Japanese yet. I mean, I'm trying to study leading up to going there, and I'm in a Japanese hospital, and the bed's probably this wide. I'm not that big. I'm 5'11". My feet are hanging over the edge. People are coming in and saying stuff to me in Japanese. I don't know what they're saying. Thank God for Koji, one of our interpreters over there, who came in all the time, made sure that everything was okay. Koji was my drinking buddy in the early stages over there too. What a great guy Koji was. I don't think I would have made it without him, but I'm in the hospital with the flu the first week, and then so just learning to speak the language, which was so hard. Even though you have your interpreters, you want to be able to communicate with the guys as much as you can. Learning Japan, learning Japanese baseball, it's different. Learning the players, the names, learn to say the names. I mean, I could say everything so easily now that I've been there, but man, everything seemed foreign because it was. Unbelievable learning curve, and again, I've never coached, and here I am with Bobby V, and here's the take on that, and I get it now. We've never really talked about this, but Bobby knew my life was baseball prior to the restaurant business, and obviously I had a high level of knowledge of the game, but nothing near what I know now after spending the 6 years with him and learning from him and Robbie over in Japan. But part of winning as an organization, whether it's a business like this or a team, you need to have your loyal people working for you that you trust and that are not backstabbing you. And I think that was probably Bobby's biggest intent on bringing me more than anything. He knew that I was a hard worker because I worked for him for all those years, and pretty smart guy, knew how to get things done and knew how to work with people, knew how to lead people, blah, blah, blah. But he knew I was loyal to him, and that was probably the biggest asset that I was able to deliver for him before I learned all the ropes of what I know now as a baseball guy, is loyalty to him, that I had his back. I was doing what he asked me to do. I wasn't questioning it, and I was one of his loyal soldiers. And then I got to learn how to, learn so much from him, and unbelievable. The first year we finished again for 500 and just missed the playoffs, which was the first time they had finished 500 since he was there the last time. Then in 2005 we won it all. It was the most magical, incredible year. We had the championship, not the equivalent of the World Series, but the equivalent of the American League Championship Series that the Yankees are in right now. Was an unbelievable series that we had it wrapped up. The champagne was on ice, and they came back and tied the game up and then beat us. We had to come back the next night and fight from behind to win it. It was just magical. And then we went to the championship and swept the Hanshin Tigers in record fashion and how many runs we scored. And then they had an Asian championship where we played that in the Tokyo Dome against all the other Asian teams, and we won that championship. And the minor league team, there's only one minor league team per organization. We won that. So what an unbelievable year for Bobby and the Cibolo Team Marines and all of us that we won everything that there was to win. The monster crazy championship ring that I have, that's pretty cool, has all the championships and numbers on it. It's really, really cool. And that year, pretty cool, gotta mention this since we're talking about this, for the first time in the history of Japanese baseball, all 4 infielders of our team won Gold Gloves, and I was the infield coach for the first 2 years, so I got a little credit for that, although they were obviously great players, and Bobby had a lot to do with that, obviously, but it was that pretty cool accomplishment. So a total of 6 years over there, and saw so many amazing things. Back to the first year, so I leave there. Michelle's pregnant with Zach. She's scheduled to do a cesarean for Zach's delivery because Frankie was a cesarean, and we're in Kobe, Japan, preseason, and I get a phone call. Zach couldn't wait. Zach came early. Zach delivered early, came early, and I wasn't there for the birth of Zach, which I still regret to this day, but he's okay with it. So as soon as Michelle had Zach, I got permission, which was unusual for this to be allowed in Japanese baseball. Bobby pulled some strings, and I was on the plane, came home, and got to see Zach. I think I got there day 2 because of the time change. But we didn't know what we were going to name him. We were debating. We didn't find out whether either our kids were boys or girls, and we didn't know what we were going to name him. We had a couple of names for boys. We had a couple of names for girls. We weren't sure. And Frankie ended up naming them, which was pretty cool. So he got this 2-year-old holding his infant brother, and it was another thing that Michelle put up with. So the birth of our second child, and me coming home from Japan was like a reunion and a party. There were coolers in the room. Michelle just had a baby. Coolers in the room, people in and out all day. It was like a frat party. Thank you, Michelle. In that room, but Frankie's sitting there holding Zach as people are wandering in, and they're asking what his name was, and we don't know. We're debating. So finally, I guess Frankie was tired of hearing that. Somebody came in, said, "What's his name?" And he said Zach. So Frankie actually officially named Zach, and you didn't hear that story, huh? Pretty cool. And back off to Japan, and then Michelle comes to Japan for the first time, right? Yeah. She's flying over for the first time to Japan with a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old. The doc said that she could fly and the baby could fly at 2 months. So here she comes, and I think you took somebody that time. Michelle used to sacrifice. Part of my contract was we got X amount of business class, which are beautiful on JAL, beautiful seats, very relaxing, great service. X amount of business class seats. We would sell a certain amount of those to trade them in for coach so that we could treat other people to come visit. Michelle would usually have somebody fly with her, but I don't know if you had anybody fly with you that first time. And by the way, I didn't trade my seats in. I came back and forth business. I guess I was more selfish than my wife. But so Michelle flies over the 2-year-old and a 2-month-old. And life in Japan was tremendous. We had this beautiful apartment. It was less than a mile from the ballpark. We rode our bikes to and fro every day. There was a park on like every corner, one right next to us. The kids grew up in these parks, learning how to play baseball, learning how to play, learning how to talk, learning how to ride bikes, learning how to do everything. People loved us. It was so clean. It was so safe. It was such a good place because I was a coach. Coaches are held in a total different regard. They're as famous as the players are over there. So we were treated like, and their families, we were treated like royalty. It was so incredible. And the lack of outside interferences of everybody, of weddings and confirmations and birthday parties and family events that you have to go to. There was nothing. It was just us and baseball. So it was great family time every day. Night games, I would be home with the kids, wake them up, have breakfast, go to the park, have lunch, and then go to the baseball park. And then they would show up every night and ride our bikes home after the game. Michelle, I wish I had a picture to show you right now. In Japan, they ride bikes with their kids, and if you have two kids, there's both. So you ride your bike, and on the front, the little kid goes. So Zach was on the front in this little seat, and on the back was another seat. So you're riding around with two kids. It was pretty funny. Michelle thought she'd never do that, and she did. And we actually had an interesting bike incident over there that we were on the road. Can't remember where we were. And Michelle had the boys. She used to go shopping. There was a Costco right down the street, which was fortunate because we can get food that was easier for us to eat. The kids weren't accustomed to the Japanese food yet. Neither was Michelle. And because Costco was right down the street, to the day, Zach's favorite pizza is Costco pizza. Kids are a little weird. All the good pizza around here at Costco is his favorite pizza. But I don't know where Michelle was that day, riding with the kids, and actually this was a little later because I think Frankie was riding his bike already, and he got a flat tire. So Michelle put him in that seat on the back, and somehow his foot got caught in the spokes and gashed him. So here's Michelle. I'm not sure which year it was. It was maybe 2007. We're on the road. She never learned how to speak much Japanese, just the basics. And here's her 6-year-old, 5-year-old gushing blood from his heel. What do I do? You know, she can't talk to anybody for help. There's no ambulance there. The hospital's down the street. How's she going to get there? And fortunately, friends of Bobby's, people he knew, our interpreters, got everything working, but it was an unbelievable. No, I'm giving you a lot of credit on here, Michelle. You deserve it, but there was a lot of stuff. Gets Frankie to the hospital, gets stitches in his heel, and just missed slicing his Achilles tendon, which that would have been bad. Because of course I want my kids to grow up and be athletes, which they are, but that would have been a rough one. So that was an unbelievable traumatic day in the life of Japan. But since we're on those type days, Zach also experienced stitches or staples while we were over in Japan. We were over there. Benny Agbayani was one of the American players on our Japanese team. You're allowed to have 4 foreigners on the major league roster, and Benny Agbayani was one of them. We became great friends with he and his family, and they were coming over for dinner. My wife loves to cook. Everybody used to love her food. She used to cook for the players. The players would come over. We'd have dinners. All the guys were so great to my kids. So Benny's coming over. I go right across the street with Zach, who at the time is 2, I think, to go to this little liquor store to grab some beers. Probably Bo beer. There was a Sapporo made a beer named after Bobby and called it Bo beer. And while we're in the liquor store, Zach trips the little store and bangs his head on the corner of a stand and is gushing blood from his forehead. And I am not good with that stuff. Michelle still stays so calm. I freak out. I leave the store. I leave my money because I was checking out when it happens. I got him. I'm running across the street up to our apartment. Michelle stays calm. Here's another amazing thing. Japan has a lot of amazing things about it, but we get Bobby. Bobby takes us over there. This hospital, like there's nobody there. There's nothing going on. It's not like a crazy emergency room like here in the States. We go in. I have no identification on me. I have no money on me, no credit cards, no nothing. I'm just panicked. My little 2-year-old's got this big gash in his head. And they take him in. They put staples in his head, which I'm freaking out. Michelle's calm while they're doing that. No money. They just took us. They took us and took care of Zach. We wrote our name down on a piece of paper and said we'll be back with our information. I mean, the fact that Bobby was with us obviously gave us a little bit more credentials, but very trusting people in Japan, man. You could leave stuff out and it does not get stolen. When my in-laws were in visiting one time, they left a pocketbook or a wallet at the train station, and we didn't realize until hours later. We go back, somebody turned it in, all the money there. Just very, very polite, cordial, friendly people. We had such a great time. And back to the stitch story. Both the boys have pretty cool stories about that. And I think Zach's is kind of cool. So, when he's in college or whatever, and the girl will ask him, hey, how'd you get that cut on your head? He goes, it was a liquor store when I was 2 years old. I don't know, maybe that girl's dad won't want him around. But the travel in Japan was unbelievable, really easy, high-speed bullet trains, short plane rides, first-class service. The service on planes and travel in Japan put us to shame here. It's embarrassing. When I first came home and flew on an airline in America, I couldn't believe it. They are so happy you're on their plane. They are there to serve you, and it's like a customer in a fancy restaurant. You know, if you get on a plane here in the States, they're usually angry at you that you're there and that you're bothering them. But speaking of travel, I'm kind of jumping all over the place right now. Funny story with Bobby related to travel. Spring training, I don't know what year it was. Bobby had a really nice team convertible BMW, steering wheel on the other side, driving on the other side. So it wasn't easy, but he got the hang of it. We're driving to Tachikawa for a spring training game, and we have Koji, our interpreter, with us, and it's me and Paul Pupo, who's a longtime restaurant guy, great friend of Bobby and his family that Bobby met when he was in Spokane, Washington, playing minor league baseball. Paul taught me everything I know about the restaurant business, and Bobby brought him over to do some data and statistician stuff. So the four of us are driving over. The GPS on the car is in Japanese. But we have a Japanese interpreter, and we know where we're going. So we're driving, and Bobby doesn't have a great sense of direction. I've been with him enough to know that, and I'm seeing I saw that already. We're not going where we're supposed to be going. So we're officially lost. Bobby has to call